So without further ado, I'd like to give you a brief bio about Dr. Eileen Collins. She's a professor of nursing in the Department of Biobehavioral Health and the Associate Dean at the University of Chicago, University of Illinois at Chicago College of Nursing. Previously, she was a research career scientist and an associate chief of staff for research at the Edward Hines VA Hospital in Chicago, Medical Center, I should say. Her research focuses on improving physical, functional, and quality of life for cardiovascular and pulmonary rehab interventions in people with those particular disease pathologies. She's continuously been funded for over 20 years by organizations such as NIH, the Veterans Administration, and various foundations. Dr. Collins has published over 90 papers in peer-reviewed publications. She teaches measurement and evidence-based practice courses at the college. She's very active in several professional organizations and serves on the board of the American Thoracic Society and the American Association of Cardiovascular and Pulmonary Rehab. She is a fellow in ATS, FAACVPR, and the American Academy of Nursing. Dr. Collins was recently inducted into the International Nurse Researchers Hall of Fame for Sigma Theta Tau. We are very honored and very privileged to have Dr. Collins here with us today to share her expertise in research and research mentoring. I hope that at the end of this presentation, you will have several ideas for projects, whether they're evidence-based practice or ideas to start your research career. The umbrella of scholarship is critical to success in the academic institution setting. So I thank you, and I'll turn over the screen to Dr. Collins.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for inviting me to speak. It's truly my privilege to talk to you today. I'm going to share my slides, so if you just give me a moment. And let me get them over to the right screen.
While Dr. Collins is doing that, I just wanted to let you know that we are recording this presentation and it will be available on the College of Nursing's website at a later date. Thank you. Okay.
So first of all, it's nice to see my my buddies from our VA days. Sometimes it makes me feel old when we go back and look back at those times. But we used to meet up in Chicago to actually hold mentorship workshops for some of our research nurse scientists within the VA system a number of years ago. So anyways, my talk today is about keys to effective mentorship relationships. Pat has already gone over the objectives, so I'm not going to repeat those. I'm going to start by talking just about what is mentoring, and then talk about the mentor-mentee relationship, and then give you some examples, both from a research perspective and also from a clinical perspective, about different things that, that some of our faculty have done related to mentorship and different roads that you might take for mentorship depending on your career path. So first of all, what is mentoring? It's basically a sharing of guidance and knowledge, sharing of opportunities by somebody who's senior to you, and they share those opportunities with their mentee. It can be for the person who is the mentor, may be a mentor for one purpose, but maybe a mentee for another purpose. Pat mentioned that I am on the board at the American Thoracic Society. Well, one of the people that I mentored in this workshop that I talked about, her name is Lynn Reinke. I mentored her on her research, but she actually was on the board of the ATS before me. So when I took over on my board position, she mentored me. So it can go both ways. It can be formal or informal, and it may involve goals and objectives, and it may not. What it always involves is communication. So things that a mentor does for you, they give you advice. They might give you advice on your next career move. They might give you advice on teaching your class. They might give you advice on writing a paper. They cheer your successes when your success is their success. They might point you in the right direction. They provide coaching. They provide support to you. They may help you clarify what your goals are, what your goals should be. So for example, in the academic realm, they may work with you on goals to move you towards promotion to the next level. They may provide training, and they may also provide motivation. Honestly, as a mentor, I derive motivation from those that I mentor, as opposed to, I think, giving motivation to those, to the mentee. I tend to derive a lot more energy from the mentoring experience. When you're looking for a mentor, one thing that you need to look for is a commitment. Is the mentor going to be committed to your success as a mentee? They should be non-judgmental. They should be offering to review your work, providing access to networks, to their networks. So when you go to conferences, typically a mentor will introduce you to people that they know, people that can facilitate your success, and they provide constructive feedback. A mentor should be very approachable, and it's a two-way street. A good mentor will inspire trust, be a good listener, be a role model. They ask questions of you, they give advice, and they should broaden your horizon. So they should encourage your creativity, facilitate your long-term development, and explore alternatives for important decisions. Sometimes I still call mentors from years past just to talk things over. What do you think my next move should be? Regardless of what it is, whether it's a position, whether it's a promotion, whether it's, where should I send a paper? It's just looking for advice. And oftentimes those relationships do turn into be long-term relationships. I see a mentor as a role, as part of the mentor's role is that of teacher. So if you're conducting research, a teacher on writing a grant application, maybe you might ask them about research design, about expectations. If you're looking for a mentor for teaching, how is the syllabus constructed? How will my teaching be reviewed? What should I expect in student evaluations? Do undergraduates versus graduate students differ in the types of evaluations that they give? These are types of questions that you should be able to feel free to ask of a mentor. I find one of the skills that we typically fail to mentor on is how to review a manuscript. So the first time you're asked to review a manuscript, it's kind of like, what am I supposed to do here? How do you give and receive criticisms? One of the things also is, how do you negotiate? There's a book out there called Women Don't Ask by Linda Babcock. I recommend it to all of my mentees. It's several years old now. I believe she's published an update. But one of the things she talks about is women asking for things. Often women sit back and wait for things to come to them as opposed to asking for it. So they don't get as far as quickly. So this is one of just a little plug for her. I don't know her or anything, but I find the book is really, really helpful. A mentor is also a role model. I think when you're functioning as a mentor, you need to remember that people are watching you. They're watching how you conduct yourself. They're watching your professional conduct. They're watching how you handle conflict. Do you get mad? Do you walk away? How do you deal with it? Do you confront it head on? They watch how you handle your staff. They watch how you handle students. They watch how you handle authorship issues. I think most importantly, they watch how you handle failure. We all fail at times, and how we handle that, hopefully with grace. Our mentees, our students, our staff are watching us. They watch how you manage your time, how you are a good citizen, hopefully, of the university, and how you manage your work-life balance. I think one of the best pieces of advice early on in my career was when the director of our laboratory announced he was going to retire. He announced it well over a year in advance. And it was clear that I would be taking over the directorship of that lab. And somebody told me, because I greatly admired this person, they said, just watch how he handles things. And I did. I would take notice just of how he handled conflict situations in particular. In that particular case, we were continuously funded by grants. So how did he handle when a grant was running out? How did he handle that stress amongst the staff? So watch people on how they handle themselves, and how they handle failure. Mentors should also be good listeners. They should be sharing their personal experience with you, hopefully. And oftentimes, as a mentor, if you just sit and listen to your mentee or somebody that you're trying to help, they can work their way through their own issue at hand. They just need somebody to bounce things off of. Mentors also need to take into account that the background of their mentee may be different. Life experience might be different. A good friend of mine, Martin Tobin, said, the mentee doesn't need someone to pave the road, but they might need someone to help them be a better navigator. The mentee, or the mentor, excuse me, is also a sponsor. They provide key introductions, so introduce you to people you should know. They may facilitate you getting on an important committee, or in a society, for example, if the society has fellowships, a mentor might be somebody that would write you a letter. On a training grant, they might facilitate you getting a role on a training grant. They might notify you when they hear of potential positions coming up. And they also tend to write a lot of recommendations. I put this gender bias in writing letters of reference here. I found it actually quite interesting. I often find myself using these words here: caring, compassionate, hardworking, conscientious. And typically those words are used again to describe women. What we should be using is successful, excellent, accomplished. It was just something that I found, and I thought it's something that I watch now when I write letters of reference for my students or for fellow faculty members, so that we don't put our mentees at a disadvantage because of their gender. So what is the mentee's role? So the mentee doesn't sit back passively and just take it all in. They need to take an active role in in this relationship. So they need to look at, do I get along with this mentor? That's really, really important. They need to look at, how many mentees does the mentor have? Do they have a lot? If so, will there be enough time for me? If they're putting in a grant application, oftentimes we put in novice mentors to serve as co-sponsors. So the mentor is providing the mentee an opportunity to learn how to mentor. If you have a very, it might be a red flag if a particular mentor has no mentees. So if you see that somebody isn't mentoring anybody, you might want to do a little bit of checking around. It might just be that they didn't have the opportunity, but there may be other reasons. So you want to make sure that you do your homework as a mentee. So what is your job? Your job is to listen, to have a positive attitude, to share your rationales for decisions that you're making. Your mentor may not always agree with what you've decided, but if you have a rationale, oftentimes you can talk through these things. And be prepared to learn from the mentor. I like to also seek advice from mentors outside of the discipline of nursing. I think it broadens your horizons. It helps you to figure out what you're doing and what other things are out there. So consider expanding a little bit, and then act on the advice they're giving you. If they're advising that perhaps you you seek an opportunity in a certain area, at least check it out, because oftentimes they do have your best interest at heart. So just some quick do's and don'ts. As a mentee, you need to take the initiative. You need to look for opportunities. You need to be respectful of the mentor's time. You need to communicate your agenda with them. When I have my students that I'm mentoring, primarily through their PhD work, I always have them, when we have our set meetings, come with an agenda. We need to have things to talk about. You need to support your peers, keep your CV up to date, and look for multiple mentors. You shouldn't be relying solely just on one person. You should have multiple people. Don't be passive. Don't be late and disorganized. And don't stay in your comfort zone. Get out of your comfort zone and look elsewhere as to opportunities that might be available to you. And don't stay in the mentoring relationship when it's no longer helpful to you. So there are a variety of stages in the mentor-mentee relationship. First, you're preparing. You're setting expectations. You're laying the groundwork. You're talking about your needs, about the mentor's needs. You're negotiating sort of this little fine dance that goes on. You're creating your learning goals. You're establishing agreements, whether they're formal or informal. And you're establishing trust. And that's really important, because in this mentor-mentee relationship, you want to be able to trust the mentor, and they should be able to trust you in what you're telling them, because you're going to probably throughout this relationship, reveal things maybe about a career move that you don't want going any further. So you should be able to trust your mentor. They should allow you to grow, and they do this through regular meetings, work on things, collaborating. The idea is that the mentee is going to grow. And then the mentorship relationship comes to an end at some point. So you need to decide what comes next. Oftentimes you'll stay good friends with whoever your mentor is. I still exchange Christmas cards with my dissertation chair from many, many years ago. And I stay friends with often different people that I have mentored, collaborate with different people, but that formal mentor-mentee relationship comes to an end. Just some tips for mentors to fully engage. As I said before, I draw energy from people that I mentor. Sometimes sort of the day-to-day work gets kind of to be a little bit of a drag, but when you get, I find when I have students come, I draw enthusiasm from them. I get energy from them to keep going. Follow through on things. If you promised you were going to get something back by such and such a date, you really try and get it back by then. Recognize that the goal for your mentee is independence. The goal is to get them out on their own and enjoy the journey. For mentees, take a chance. Hold up your end, be self-directed, be self-motivated, and acknowledge that what you're getting from your mentor is actually a gift. It's a gift of mentorship. Common pitfalls is in the process, not knowing what to talk about or talking too much. This is one of the reasons why I have my students come with an agenda. If we have an hour-long meeting scheduled, at least have a few items that we're going to be talking about. Oftentimes there might be no period for review. There should be a period where you look at things again and you reassess things. There might be some role confusion. Someone might have breached the rules. They might have been indiscreet if something was revealed. So that's actually quite toxic to a relationship. So you need to question if things aren't working out. And you always need to be aware of context and cultural differences. I don't know about you, but I found that doing mentoring virtually can both be a gift and a challenge. You don't get that sort of going out to lunch, discussing different things where things are a little bit less formal. But I have found with my students, I actually meet with them more often now that we're virtual, simply because you don't have all that commuting time. And we set a time and we're both there on each end of the Zoom call, so to speak. So I thought what I would do would just give you some examples of different ways that we look at mentoring, how they're described on grants, what we do, what some of our clinical faculty do at UIC to facilitate mentorship relationships. Hillary Thompson, who is a professor at University of Washington, published a paper in 2020 on the individual development plan. Now, the individual development plan is intended for people doing research, but people who are not doing research can also really benefit from this as well. So she suggested a T32 grant is a training grant. So these individual development plans should be completed for everybody that's a mentee, a PhD student or a postdoc on a development plan. And things that she said should be in there were a self-assessment tool, goals, but I think goals count for everybody. What are your goals? What do you want to do? What do you want to write about? What do you need help with? Less common things that were included were teaching skills that people wanted to develop, socialization to the profession, required coursework. And then they would include some unique parts such as individualized coursework, grants management training, and this type of thing. And this is an example, I just put this out there as an example of how they structured it. And again, this could be structured for somebody in research as easily as it could be structured for somebody in pursuing scholarly fields related to clinical. You could take out this whole thing about the responsible conduct of research and look it up, but think about strategically, where do you want your career to go? Where do you want to be in 5 years, and develop a plan on how to get there? And these training grants, actually, that's what they do, is they require the trainees to put together a plan. How am I going to get from point A to point B? And this works whether you're in research or whether you're doing clinical work. So is there specific coursework that you need to take? Specific seminars that you want to make sure that you don't miss? Your mentorship meetings? Are there experiences that you think that you need to get? Conferences that you want to attend? I saw this actually in a training grant that somebody had written, and they actually spelled out where they wanted to be. So an F31 is a grant that you get as a PhD student. And then they listed out what they wanted to gain from a postdoctoral fellowship. And then this would be an award that you would get as a faculty member. And I thought it was just a really nice representation where they showed how they built on one level on top of the other. And again, this could be done for research purposes as well as for clinical purposes. So when we talk about clinical scholarship, it's a little bit different. The research scholarship is creating new knowledge, and clinical scholarship is more about applying the knowledge that we already have. Both are equally as important, and they're equally important for our practice. So you want to identify your area of expertise and look for solutions to problems. They're right in front of you. I'll be giving you an example in a couple of slides. But you also want to prepare your path for success. What does it take for promotion? What are you going to do? What are you going to publish? What presentations are you going to do? Plan for things ahead. For students, do they need a publication to get hired into a faculty position? Plan for it. Make sure it gets done. Clinical scholarship can include guidelines and program initiatives. There's been a lot of clinical scholarship about 30-day rehospitalizations, about the COVID-19 response. You can talk about student initiatives. What things have your students done that have just been really exciting that you can share with others? Typical grant applications for those on more of a clinical track include HRSA awards, so educational awards. What can we do to foster education at our institution? One of the really neat initiatives at UIC, I think, is initiative that they have with our prisons, and it's out of the Hillman Foundation. So we actually have staff going into the local jails and prisons, bringing students with them, and they do healthcare education. And we've recently then we have taken some of the we are in the middle of initiating a contract where the detainees, when they're released from incarceration, they actually are followed then in our nurse-run clinic that's in the Humboldt Park region, which is a mainly Hispanic part of the city. And it's really a nice initiative. And this is totally run by our clinical faculty through a Hillman Foundation grant accompanied by a HRSA grant that they obtained to expand the practice. That was the HRSA grant part. And the Hillman Foundation part was the part about going into the prisons and the jails. It's led to some really nice collaborations with Sheriff Dart and also some really nice student experiences that the students say this is one of the best things that they've experienced with their clinical time at UIC. Other areas of clinical scholarship can include case studies, systematic reviews, policy papers, etc. So often with scholarly writing, the first question is, where do I begin? And I often find that that's the hardest part is writing the beginning. So when I write, I often don't start with the beginning. I start with the middle, and I write something that I know is easy to write. For me, since I do mostly research writing, it's the method section. And why do I start with the method section? Because they're already written in my grant. So often I'll just cut and paste them and then sort of doctor them up a little bit for a publishable manuscript. But for those of you who are doing clinical scholarship, you may start with a guideline that you have, or you may start with a syllabus that you have in a class. Just start somewhere, put something down on paper, and don't worry what it looks like at the start. At UIC, we have what we call WAGs, which are writing accountability groups, where people get together and they hold each other accountable. And they also review each other's writing. They put each other on each other's papers, which works for everybody. But the main idea is that they hold each other accountable. We had for a while at UIC an editor that would meet with our writing accountability groups, which was also very helpful. But the one thing to remember is that writing really takes practice. You only get good at it when you've done it a lot. Again, I recalled when I was doing my dissertation, my PhD advisor, I would find holes in the paper from places where she would cross things out in red. And I always tell my mentees, if you're getting a lot of feedback from me, that means that I really care about you. And my PhD advisor was a terrific writer, and she cared about my success. So she gave me a lot of feedback. And likewise, if somebody's giving you a lot of feedback on a paper, be grateful for that, because they're spending a lot of time and energy on your success. I thought I'd give you a little example, which turns into actually a very big example of one of the people that is in the American Thoracic Society. Susan Jacobs is a nurse practitioner out of UCSF. And she was part of our nursing assembly. She is part of the nursing assembly within the ATS. And one time on a call that we were having, she was late to the phone call. And she said, I just can't take it anymore dealing with these oxygen companies. I spend half my day writing out what to do for patient oxygen and trying to put the right words for patient's oxygen. And I just can't get it to work. So at the time, we were having a call about plans that we would put forward to the ATS for funding. And we were having trouble coming up with something. So when Susan came complaining about oxygen, we thought, why not focus on this oxygen issue, getting our patients oxygen? What we came to find out was that reimbursement to these durable medical equipment companies were shrinking rapidly. And CMS, which is the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, was decreasing their reimbursement. What was happening is things were getting turned down. Patients were not being instructed on how to use the equipment. There was a lot of time and effort on the staff in the clinics, and it took forever to get the paperwork approved. So after multiple conversations, the ATS funded a very small grant for us to look at this home oxygen issue. As it turned out, it was a major issue, and it was a major issue that very few people besides the people impacted by it were aware of. So we worked with the American Thoracic Society, mainly the advocacy group, and we pulled together a meeting at our next meeting, which happened to be in Washington, D.C. So we invited patient advocacy groups. We also invited several patients who used oxygen, and they showed up with their portable tanks. We invited the people from CMS, and we talked in this group setting about the issues that these patients were having with their oxygen. What we found was that CMS was totally unaware that any problems existed. So they kept saying, well, nobody's called our number. And the patients looked at them and said, what number? And they said, well, our 1-800 number. Well, we didn't even know you existed. We were calling the durable medical people. So CMS then said, well, we can't act on what you're telling us unless you have data. So our clinical people partnered with our researchers, and we developed together a survey of patients who were requiring oxygen. This resulted in multiple presentations, multiple papers. Susan has made multiple trips to Capitol Hill talking about the needs of patients who receive home oxygen, to the point where CMS is changing their policy. Now imagine changing CMS reimbursement policy in the federal government takes a huge, I'm going to say it takes an act of Congress, and it actually may very well take an act of Congress. But it's a huge change. Reimbursement has changed. And most importantly, there's been an effective change through to patients. But a number of people and a number of clinical scholars published papers, they increased their scholarship, and it all started with just on the telephone saying, I can't deal with these durable medical equipment companies. So there's something that you can do in sometimes just the smallest of moments. I don't know if you do career maps here, but we encourage them, of our junior faculty at UIC. And the reason we encourage them is that we try and get people to feel for a direction of where they want to go. And we also encourage them amongst our PhD students. And they can be used for faculty who are interested in research, as well as faculty who are interested more in clinical scholarship. So this is courtesy of Sueilroy. She's a recent graduate of our PhD program. And Sue is interested in simulation. And she started out with her elevator speech, which is, I'm interested in researching the effects of interprofessional education. This is of great interest to her. And pairing that with simulation. So she would go on and say, the literature demonstrates that there's a gap in the knowledge when associating interprofessional education with patient outcomes and changes in staff clinical knowledge. So one of the goals that she wanted to achieve was that she would like to implement new simulation. We have a new simulation lab at UIC. So she would like to use the new simulation lab to promote IPE, as it'll give various disciplines a chance to work together in a simulated clinical setting. So when you look at this, you think, well, this is nice. Simulation is good. We all know simulation is good. Simulation can help interprofessional education. So this is very nice. However, when we pushed Sue to develop a career map, and I will tell you, admittedly, this was done for a session that we did on career mapping. We said, what do you hope to do with simulation? What's your end game? What is it that you really, really want to accomplish? And what she really wanted to accomplish was to prevent needless deaths in the hospital, in hospital emergencies through interprofessional education in the neonatal and pediatric populations. So Sue was a pediatric nurse, and she saw that when people didn't talk to each other well, they didn't know, like the nurse didn't know what the respiratory therapist, the depth of what they were doing, who was not used to working with the social workers or the medical students or the clinicians or whatever, that things didn't always go well. So she thought, I want to prevent needless deaths in hospital emergencies by fostering this interprofessional education early on. So that's her goal. So then how do you go about achieving that goal? So we started with this center circle, and she's starting interprofessional education with ACLS and PALS, and this is a multidisciplinary collaboration. And she's actually writing about this in the Journal of Pediatrics, and she submitted that. Well, actually, I just got an email from her today. She's going to be submitting that in this month sometime. She's also submitted a literature review, and she's trying to publish her dissertation work. So this is the small circle here. She's gradually moving out. She just took a position as she graduated from our PhD program as the director of our simulation lab. So she's doing, she's looking with 387 nursing students at emergency responses, but in a simulated area. She's also looking for HRSA grants for this. She wants to get this simulation activity supported. She's hoping to be branching out to look at outpatient emergencies and to involve the colleges of medicine, pharmacy, and dentistry in these simulated events, and eventually simulate trach emergencies and different types of emergencies in the simulation laboratory. So we do the ultimate, which is preventing needless death. So she's laid out this map for herself over the course of time in what she hopes to accomplish. We have another faculty member, Judy Schleger, who is more interested in research. Now, Judy has a very interesting background. She studies vulvodynia in women. It's experienced by over 7 million American women. And her goal is to alleviate suffering in Americans with chronic pain. Judy has a unique background in that she completed her PhD in China, and she studied Eastern medicine, Chinese medicine, specifically acupuncture, when she was in China. So this is what Judy started out with, at sort of multiple versions of her quote unquote elevator talk. And this was one of her first career maps. Now, if I look at this as a career map, I think it looks like a hot mess, to be perfectly honest with you. There's arrows all over the place, and I would say, what's wrong with this person? You see this nice little diagram here in the middle, and she has a really nice goal. And the goal is to expand the paradigm of Western medicine by integrating tenets of traditional Chinese medicine. And she's doing this for people who are in labor, for people with angina, people with sickle cell disease, people with vulvodynia. And she has this unique method, which is she has double-blinded acupuncture needles. And she gets these made especially in Japan. It's an arduous process, but she is one of the few investigators that's investigating acupuncture using double-blinded needles. But it takes a lot of work to get through this career map. So Judy is probably one of our most ardent career mappers, and she feels that it really helps her point a direction to her career. So this is the most recent one that she came up with. And what she's done is she's created these different ribbons. You see this blue ribbon is conventional medicine. The red ribbon is traditional Chinese medicine. Now recall that she's trying to combine the two. And then she's got acupuncture, this green ribbon running through it as her unique methodology. She's using it in vulvodynia, she's using it in angina, she's using it in cancer pain, sickle cell pain, and And she's also looking at acupuncture mechanisms. And her goal is to relieve suffering of 130 million Americans who are living with chronic pain. So this actually makes a lot more sense to me. She's then put in different events, whether it's funding or things that have happened throughout her career. And hopefully in the future, she sees this as extending off to the right. So just two examples of how you might consider using a career map to sort of just map out where you want to go. I thought I'd also just tell you about a few programs that we have at UIC in terms of mentoring programs. We offer a regular seminar series that we offer for faculty and PhD students. We talk, it mainly focuses on research. It's focused on team science, what to do with missing data. Career cartography was actually one of the sessions that we offered. We also look to other things that are going on in the university, such as our training programs, and our faculty and our students go over there for training as well. We have a couple of programs for faculty that I think are really kind of neat. We have a formal faculty mentoring program at UIC. Every junior faculty member that comes to the college is assigned a formal mentor. They're supposed to meet regularly. To be truthful, some of these relationships work better than others, so we're trying to shore those up. We also have mentorship classes for our faculty who are serving as mentors, because often mentors, they have questions as to what kind of things should I be covering? What should I be doing? I want to be successful. None of us go into this wanting to fail. So there's a lot of support provided to junior faculty. It strengthens the relationships within the college. Oftentimes your mentor is outside of your department. So I have a couple of mentors, for example, that are in our population health department. And they oftentimes extend into mid-career. A couple of people that I mentored as junior faculty, I still meet with them once a month now that they're associate professors. And it's turned into just a really nice relationship. We also have a nursing administrative fellowship. It's on hold now to something called because of something called the pandemic. But it is where a faculty member gets a course release for one semester, and they participate in the college leadership at various levels, whether it's working with the senior executive associate dean or working with a department head. They're assigned a specific mentor, and they work on a leadership project. And then they also attend the leadership meetings, so they get a feel for what's going on from a leadership perspective. We also have a faculty administrator leadership program, and these are for more senior faculty who wish to go into a leadership role, such as being a department head or an associate dean. It exposes the faculty member to different things that are going on at the university. So for example, and I participated in this a few years ago, and we met with, the housing people. We met with faculty affairs, we met with student affairs, and there were different educational things that we did. We shadowed deans from other colleges a couple of days. So it was really a nice opportunity just to see how the university worked. Again, there was an administrative project tied to that as well that we did. We also have something called the President's Executive Leadership Program. The University of Illinois, for those of you who don't know, is actually a system. We have University of Illinois Chicago, University of Illinois Springfield, and University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana. And it's headed by the president of the university. So this was the president's program, and this was really interesting. It was offered at the system level. I had the opportunity to take part in this as well. And it was really fascinating. We spent 3 days in Washington, D.C. It happened to be, this will tell you when it was during the Brett Kavanaugh hearing. So it was really interesting to be there in DC at that time. But we met with different organizations, the American Association of Public Land Colleges, the different organizations for universities, We met with the people who advocate for us in Washington, D.C. We met with our congressmen and with our senators. So it was really interesting. And then we spent 3 days at each campus meeting with the leadership of the various campuses and learning about different programs that they have there, different types of mentorship programs, things that we might bring back to our own local campus. But I think probably one of the most important things that I gained from being mentored in this program was just learning who's who at the different campuses. I can call on people now at Champaign-Urbana if I need something. For example, I have a faculty member who's interested in an urban gardening project for some of her patients. And I can call to the Vice Chancellor for Research. She was in my little cohort, and say, who do you have in your agriculture department that I can contact to help out my faculty member? It was just really, really fascinating. So there's all kinds of opportunities, which I'm sure there are at your university as well. You just have to go looking for them. So at that, I will stop sharing and close, and thank you so much for inviting me, and open this up to questions if you have any.
Thank you, Dr. Collins. Appreciate it. My name is Marlena, for those of you who don't know me, and I am the Director of Alumni Relations. So if you have a question for Dr. Collins, you can either write it in the chat, or if you'd like to virtually raise your hand by pushing the reactions button and raise your hand at the bottom of your screen, you can do that as well. I'll alternate on calling on people as well as reading questions in the chat.
Mark, it's nice to see you. I just see you on the screen right now.
Nice to see you too, Eileen. I guess I'll try and get the ball rolling here. A lot of times, even if we're not in a formal mentoring relationship, whether we know it or like it or not, we're role modeling for more junior people. And so could you maybe talk a little bit about does role modeling, whether you know you're doing it or not, count as a kind of mentoring? Because I mean, I can remember back to graduate school, people that I just had as professors. They weren't formally my mentors in terms of my career path or whatever, but there's still, you know, there'll be some memorable thing that they said that has really stuck with me.
Absolutely. I think role modeling is probably the most important type of mentoring. You know, anybody can talk the talk, but you have to walk the walk, so to speak. I know I watch myself, I still do, especially when thorny issues arise. I like just to watch how people handle it. How do they, do they face it head on? Do they try and gain consensus? Just how do they handle it, and how did it work out at the end? And what can you take from that as somebody who's maybe learning how to do this stuff, or just figuring out better ways to handle things yourself? So I think role modeling is probably the most important thing. One of the things actually that I noticed that I admired was just when your dean here went to started vaccinating patients. I mean, what a great model of leadership for the rest of the faculty. What a great model, you know, to put out there for, you know, for nurses who are graduates of your program. I mean, that shows great leadership. She's out there actually, you know, putting shots in people's arms. So those types of things, you kind of look at what people do, and I think it really can be really valuable for the people who report to you, who are just learning the ropes, and you oftentimes don't even know they're watching. Like Chris probably didn't even know I saw that picture, so, but people do. So it, you know, people watch.
Thank you.
Mhm.
We have a question in the chat. Mitchell Irving asks, what are some of the issues and limitations of mentoring undergraduate students while in the functioning in the role of the undergraduate faculty?
Undergraduate students. I think mentoring undergraduate students can be tough. They have, and I'll speak from that, who is somebody that did their undergraduate quite a while ago, because I think the experience is so different now than when I went back to school. And the educational experience is so different. Many of our students, school is not their primary role. As there's being a student is not their primary role. Oftentimes they're a breadwinner, or they're this might be a second career choice. So I think that is makes it difficult. Also, many of our undergraduates are younger, and they're maturing as they're facing many of these life experiences that many of our patients are going through. And I think sometimes helping them work through, talking through those experiences with them can be extremely important, and how you handle it, how you process things. I can't imagine being an undergraduate instructor for this past year. It's had to have been incredibly difficult for instructors to model what's going on, what you might agree or disagree with in terms of what's going on in the world, how people are handling different things. So being a role model, again, is extremely important. Being a listener, what they're going through, what they're experiencing, also very important. And also giving them the opportunity to grow up, especially some of the younger ones. They need to grow up. I had a great experience. It wasn't undergrad, it was with my PhD student, and we invited her back. She did her PhD, and she did a good job. And she went on. But she was a little, I don't want to say immature, but a little bit. And she now works on Capitol Hill. She found her niche in public policy, and she came back to speak to our students. And I tell you, I just felt so proud of what she had accomplished. But the one thing that occurred to me was she really grew up. So I think that's a challenge, especially with some of our younger students.
Okay, thank you. Erica Torres says, what structure do you think works best in a college setting, a formal or informal mentoring model?
We have implemented at UIC a formal model because what we find when we leave it informal is that it gets forgotten. And people become so busy that we don't pay attention to it. And if somebody happens to have their office next door to somebody who is a really good role model and mentor, they get mentored well. But if they happen to be out on their own, then it's left to chance. And that's what we're trying to avoid, is leaving things so much to chance. So I think having some formal mentorship in a college is a good thing. At least there's a structure, both for mentors and mentees. For mentors, where they can, this is what the expectation is. And for mentees, there's a lot of things that you can do in group settings, things for, career development, for example, teaching development, things that we expect of faculty can be offered in a group setting.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Anybody else?
Oh, Dr. Collins, this is Erica Torres. I have another question. Let's say that at an institution, you have many people interested in being mentees, but you have few people who can be their mentors. How do you decide who gets the mentorship and who doesn't?
That's tough. and I think that happens at a lot of institutions because everybody's always looking for mentorship in some regard. I don't think you decide who gets it and who doesn't. I think you have to change the model of how it's done. So you might go from an individual model to maybe more of a group model. So you might go instead of meeting individually with people, you might develop group meetings. This is something that we've struggled with at UIC as well. We have a glut of junior faculty. We have a lot of junior faculty, but as we don't have a lot of associate professors and we have even less full professors. So what we've started doing is having sort of group mentoring programs with the assistant professors. And they come up with specific things they want to know about, and we make arrangements for that. We have people that will, these writing groups help started out that way. That was a need that people felt that they absolutely needed this writing help. So we started writing groups out. So we converted to more of a group mentoring as opposed to the one-on-one model that people are most used to. Any other thoughts, questions?
Eileen, could you briefly, if it's possible to do it briefly, speak to some of the challenges of mentoring across cultural differences? For example, mentoring students who grew up in other countries and who came up through very different educational systems from ours. And I think that that's something that personally I've found challenging.
Yeah, I agree with you. I find that challenging at times as well. We have a lot of Asian students at UIC who come through our program, and they tend to be very deferential. And sometimes you just want them to speak out. And so I think you have to take those cultural nuances obviously into account. So with some of my students, I make them speak and do that more on a one-on-one as opposed to maybe in a group until they're comfortable. Sometimes there's English language difficulties and those types of things need to be worked out as well. But offer their opinion, even if they're uncomfortable doing so. And I also think we have to take into account just basic cultural differences in places, maybe how those of us who grew up differently. You know, when you're drawing students from a very urban environment, and maybe that's not your background, you have to make those cultural adjustments to be able to make those students successful. So I don't have any magic wand for that, Mark. I mean, I take it one student at a time, which is, I think, the way you need to. Our students do tend to form groups of their own. So they kind of have their cultural events. And I think it's really nice. They always invite us to them. And you know, so we get invited to the Thai New Year and different celebrations that they have. And I think it broadens our horizons as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else? Well, Dr. Collins, thank you again for sharing your expertise with us. We truly appreciate it. For those of you with us, please don't forget to sign into the chat. And also, we have put the SurveyMonkey link so that you can fill out your evaluation if you want your CEs. And please do that by the 17th of March. Thank you, everyone.
I thank you. I want to thank you again, Eileen, for coming and sharing your pearls of knowledge with us. And we'll be probably tapping into you again. And it's always nice to see a fellow VA person. We have quite a few here. Thanks again.
Thank you for having me.